So we're bound to learn, given the dynamics of how we've evolved over the
But
years.
a 65-year-old child is still a 65-year-old child.
Well, you can look at it as a 65-year-old child, but again, don't forget that you've also had this country being stirred by different dynamics of leadership.
Military coups,
civil war, all those dynamics, and a very rapidly growing population. And I think now we are getting to what I'll call a cruising altitude. We are now self-aware of our, various dynamics. I mean, multiple tribes. You've got the majority 50-50 Muslim Christian dynamics. You've got 200 plus million population. The mainstay of our economy has been seen as oil, but then again, we are realizing that putting too much over dependency on oil has to foster more of economic diversification. You have arable land that spans hundreds of thousands of square kilometers uncultivated. You've got fantastic weather, which is somewhat tropical as well. So
youthful population.
And a youthful population, absolutely, that probably takes over 60-65% of the population from 0 to 35 years, as we'll classify as youths. And one thing you can never take away from us as Nigerians is our ability to persevere and be extremely resilient despite our journey over the years. I mean, one thing you would see about Nigerians is, and maybe late fella symbolized that in one of his music, suffering but still smiling. And that's quite unique. Yes, you highlighted some of the indicators in our economy, double-digit inflation, high unemployment, and the likes. But I think now we're becoming more self-conscious. And we're becoming more self-conscious because we are now aware of what's playing out in a globalized environment. And we are now aware that the reality is charity has to begin at home. And all you've got at the end of the day is your home base in reality. Yes, you have a high level of high rate of people migrating to other countries under the guise of Japa and all of that.
But is that a good
But then
side to
again,
that?
well, it's a yes and no. And I think yes in the sense that if you went there, to get a broader based level of understanding and have a broad based level of what it means to be part of a globalized ecosystem, then the answer is yes, because you have the opportunity of going to good schools, gain good jobs and experiences. But at the end of the day, whilst you're through that journey of whether it's your working experience, you can still remit back in terms of remittances back. Yeah, I mean, I think 2023, the World Bank probably rated it somewhere in the likes of maybe Nigerian specific, somewhere about $20 to $25 billion coming back in remittances, coming back home. So that's good. But the question is, how well are we utilizing those remittances back locally? Two, if you're jackpine or migrating, and you are not embedded in the core of those countries you have been to, or you find yourself on the menial side of things, then you start to ask yourself, what's the real value and worth at the end of the day? But that being said, I mean, when we look inwards now, we are becoming more self-conscious. I mean, thankfully, we can see what's happening on the cultural space, on the entertainment space. We're seeing that even at that, lots of talent, whether it's in the areas of sports, entertainment, and the ability to just push the flag flying for your country, Nigeria. Look at what's happening in the Afrobeat scene now, where young talents who are harnessed here locally are able to export their entertainment abilities on the global scale, and yet there's acceptability.
Casey,
We-
you've hit something that I know you're quite vast. Like, I mean, you had mentioned about creating funds, but before we move into this creative space, which is something I'm very passionate about, and my industry,
Yes.
I just wanted to just sort of wrap up on this governance and politics for a bit.
Correct. Good.
You're an Igbo man who grew up in Lagos for most part of your life. The last election, people said, was very, very polarized, very, very borderline tribalistic. And it started to feed almost the sense of the palpitation people experienced during the Civil War, where you're hearing things like, go back home to Abia State, go back home to where you're coming from. From your own experience, do you think that post-election enough is being done to stabilize or at least educate people away from the tribalistic bias, to help people understand that a bad president is a bad president, or a good president is a good president for all, regardless of your tribe or your religion? Is about the competence and ability to deliver. But the last election has left us with so many questions and wounds that have not closed. But as someone who grew up in Lagos, who saw both sides, an Igbo man, an Igbo culture, Yoruba culture, and that tension has always been there, how do you reconcile that reality, and how do you think we can move forward from there?
Well, I think if I come back to our generation, which I'll say, 40s downwards, I think we are really at that pinnacle of really demystifying what it means to be in a united Nigeria, which I think is truly possible. I mean, post the Civil War, we've still had the country stand on one footing, one strong footing. I mean, the two sides were still able to come together, irrespective of the fact that there were still bruises and wounds as an aftermath of the war. And when you look at it today, you can see what's happening with the Southeasterners who are here in Nigeria, immersed in almost all spheres of the economy, of the economy. I mean, and nowhere you would go to in Nigeria that you wouldn't see quite a number of them, whether it's the north or west or south or wherever, they're all immersed there. And I guess it's for quite a number of other tribes, the ability to integrate into various parts of the country. Now, the last election, we all saw that quite polarized, as you rightfully said. But at the end of the day, I think the real game changer for that election in specific, I would say, was the politics itself. But I think barring the politics aside, I think we're all conscious of the fact that we all have to find a way to move on in some way or form. As a sovereign nation, there's no other place we can call our country other than Nigeria in itself. And I think what the leadership of today is quite conscious of is that it has to serve for the entire country and for its people, regardless of the nuances and perceptions that people may have or people may say. I mean, and fact be told, if you look at the last summary of the last Federal Executive Council meeting that just played out on Monday, the Federal Executive Council led by President Tinubu approved loads of road infrastructure projects. And I kid you not, majority of those projects were domiciled within the southeast and south-south axis. which shows that regardless of the perceptions, the Federation or the center understands that, look, it has to serve for all in a sense. And I think it's one of the things we all need to set aside in our mindset that, look, regardless of these things, we just have to come together and just move ahead. I mean, I'm married to someone from the Southwest. I went to marry from Osun State, and it's just a reflection of, is the way I see the country. I'm Igbo, grew up in Lagos. I mean, majority of my childhood was immersed out of Lagos. I wouldn't claim I had all of that from my father's village, which obviously is my heritage or my roots. But, Lagos is where I know the most. I feel very at home here, in as much as I can still go back, to my, heritage or roots back in Abia State. But we are those guardians today.
Sure.
And we just have to realize that we have to put that positive mindset and positive front to ensure that the country continues to remain united.
On leadership in Africa. Leadership in Africa, I think that we've always been, people talk about our quality of leadership as being subpar to the global quality. And that sometimes you find very quality leaders in the private sector, but not in the public sector. And across Africa, you have a very rich resource continent that has been largely not harnessed to economic prosperity and gain. The indices are crossed from maternal mortality to unemployment, yet it's a prime population, right? And I think in about 2050, Africans will hit 2.5 billion, which is 25% of the world population then. And we're talking about a median age of somewhere between moving around 18.5 to 19.6. So everything is good and bad. It's such an interesting twist. But looking at we're still dealing with portions of war on the continent, tensions and all of those things. In your own perspective of Africa, if you're allowed to paint a picture of what you think the Africa of your dream is, and how you in your own mind think young Africans, who are mostly our listeners, can tap into their collective disaffection and channel it into a mission. But maybe the question is about your dreams for Africa amidst all the challenges.
I think we're in a very amazing era right now, and this is an era where I think Africa will truly reach its self-realization. I mean, your indices are spot on the continent. Today, we're about 1.2 billion. Again, majority of that, 70% of that is the youthful population.